Hi, welcome to a very special edition of TFT Hyperroll. Well, let me say it this way. The road to hyper. Okay, I'm being a little silly, but this is a tips and tricks video where I'm going to take you through a couple of different matches and show you what I'm thinking, what I'm doing, and hopefully it helps you. First, I want to talk about the opening carousel. I usually use it to go for item. A recursive bow is one of my favorites because it is very versatile, but you're not going to get it every time, so you have to think of some other things. Sometimes I'll grab a sword, sometimes a Negatron cloak, but sometimes I will see the perfect item on the perfect character, such as a chain vest on a Leona, where I know I'm just one item away from making something like a Sunfire cape on a tanky character. But let's look at what's happening in this match. It immediately gave me an Irelia out of the NPC round, and then there were a couple of Olafs, so I'm immediately thinking Skirmisher, or possibly Sentinel. It'll depend a lot on what items I get going forward. You really want to let the items try to guide you into what you're going to build. So as we pick up these globes, it's going to tell us a lot about what we can do going forward. Right there, we have the BF sword and the Negatron cloak, which creates a Bloodthirster, or the Runan's Hurricane if you combine the Negatron cloak with the recursive bow. Getting the chance to get an additional Negatron cloak makes the whole thing really clear, but it's giving us a whole bunch of redeemed characters at the bottom. So you want to pick those up just in case, but the chance to make 3 skirmishers, you don't pass it up because that's an immediate buff and you can itemize your strongest character and hopefully get yourself ready to go on a win streak. Now that fancy little pixelated transition means that we are switching games. This is a different game that I'm going to be showing you at the same time. In this one, I started off with an Atrox with a sword. Now I get a needlessly large rod, so I'm immediately thinking, okay, that's a Hex Tech, and that can go on Vel'Koz, and I have an Atrox, so maybe we're going to go redeemed. But we haven't seen what characters it's going to give us out of the round. Sometimes it can just give you gold or a Nico's help, but I'm usually hoping that I get some kind of character to guide me in what build I'm going to do. And there they are, a mishmash. Nothing is specifically matching with anything else, but it did give me another needlessly large rod. Now if you combine that with the sparring glove I got before, it makes the jeweled gauntlet. And the Hex Tech and the jeweled gauntlet are absolutely key items for Vel'Koz. We clear that and see, well, I got a bunch of sentinels going on down at the bottom, so maybe we want to head in that direction. We're going to sell the Atrox in the long term anyway because that sword does not belong on him. We pick up the brand and then get an additional Olaf, so for the moment we're 3 sentinels in and we're going to see where this takes us. We pixelate back over to match 1 just to see how that first round turned out. We had a 2-star Olaf and he was well itemized, so I'm hoping that we're going to start off winning with that skirmisher buff because that's adding attack damage every second. We had the right items, we had the right characters, and everything seems to be going. Pixelate back to our other match and, well, as you can see, we've lost a couple because we're only down to 16 health. And even though we now have 2 2-star Olafs, the items just don't match. The moment we have a chance to 2-star a Leona, we're going to look at redeemed. And Brand, who I've managed to 2-star at this point, is the perfect item holder for Vel'Koz because he's going to be casting often and it's going to be powerful. So we're going to load him up with the Vel'Koz items and hope that we can at least start to see more hope in these games because the early games were not going well. The key is being able to pivot at times and see, okay, this isn't working, where are my items taking me? With 2 clear Vel'Koz items and then starting to see enough redeem to create the redeem buff, we knew it was time to switch. Back over to match 1, here's a no duh. If you see a spatula, take it, unless it does not work. But let's look at Radiant items. This build is turning into Skirmisher, and you really have the rapid fire cannon as your obvious choice here. It's going to allow your main carry, who at this point is Olaf, but he's really just an item holder for Jax. It's going to allow him to step back, do his attacks from the distance, and allow Irelia and Udyr to absorb most of the damage. Any chance to increase your number of buffs, you want to take it. So having Nidalee in gave us an additional skirmisher, but it didn't trigger the cannoneer buff. In this case, we took out Nidalee, put in Senna to trigger Cannoneer, which now allows Lucian to do more damage. You will see that allowing him to have his ult will create more damage on their side, allowing Olaf even more time to build up his attack damage and ultimately win this fight. Pixelating back over to match number 2, it's Radiant item time. Yeah, Spear of Hirana is just a no-brainer. It is a Vel'Koz item, because Vel'Koz needs a mana item. We were immediately rewarded with a 2-star Syndra. We've reached that point in the video where I take a small break from the action. You'll be able to see me rolling at the bottom, but I want to tell you what this channel is about. It's called Mission4Tuition because we created it to try to raise money for our son's middle and high school tuition since he has to go to a special school. We do not ask for donations of any kind. We get our money from the view revenue. So if you can hit like on this video, if you like it, that'll help YouTube spread it to more people, which will lead to more views, which will lead to more money for tuition. Thank you so much. Now, when your health is low like this, you want to get items onto characters as fast as possible. Notice that I'm also using Azira to trigger the Spellweaver buff on Vel'Koz. He needs to be the carry and be as absolutely strong as possible. So even though you may have an opportunity to put out a 7th redeemed, or in this case I have Fiddlesticks, that could be a Mystic, it's not the right time for it. We need Vel'Koz at 1-star to be as strong as possible. You always want to find ways to make your carry strong as possible. We pixelate back over to our skirmisher match, and we were lucky enough to find a BF sword, which when combined with the spatula will give us a skirmisher buff. So we can now turn Lucian into a skirmisher, which is going to be infinitely more powerful. It took us several rounds and most of our gold, but we finally got a Jax, and my plan is to replace that Olaf with a Jax. So you may be asking, hey Artark, how do I know when to replace a character with a different character? I use a really simple formula, which it's good for casual players. Look, don't use this in Challenger, and no Challenger would do this, but it's a basic numbers game. Olaf costs 3, Silver Olaf 3 1 costs, Jax costs 4, 4 is bigger than 3. There are of course lots of exceptions at this when you're playing at higher levels, but for just basic play, especially in Hyperroll, it's a pretty good rule to follow, and I'll get a little more into it when we switch back to our other match because there are some other calculations you may want to consider. But you'll see immediately Jax is doing just fine in this spot, picking up lots of damage from the skirmisher buff and able to take out that group of redeemed. Speaking of redeemed, we pixelate over to our redeemed match, and we're looking for a silver Vel'Koz, but we want to roll down just to make sure we're using the Nico's help in the right way, since we were just 1 star away from the gold Syndra. The 3-star Syndra, gold Syndra, same thing. So at this point, we've now set ourselves up pretty well for this next fight. We have our 2-star Vel'Koz, we have our 3-star Syndra, we have a pretty strong front line, and we have the right items on Vel'Koz. So we're hoping we can survive even though we're way down at the bottom of the board. And luckily, yep, we made it through that one. Now remember earlier I talked about a simple formula for figuring out what character to put in. Well, swapping a 1-star Kayle for a 2-star Varus would fail that, because a 2-star Varus is 6, he's a 2 cost, and 3 is 6, and a 1-star Kayle is 5. However, Kayle gives the Legionnaire buff, so adding an additional buff, for me, I add 2 points onto it into my head, so that then becomes a 7 versus a 6. And I know there were a bunch of exceptions where there are lower cost characters that are better than higher cost characters, but overall, just in general, if you're playing this game casually, I find it to be a good guide as to help you decide when it's time to remove someone and replace them with someone else. Just consider how much the previous character cost versus how much this character cost and any buffs you might get. One thing I do want to cover, when your health is low like this and you're in danger of being out, Teemos equal money. Again, Teemos equal money. You're not losing a life, but Teemos equal money. Back over to our skirmisher match, where we are now rolling down to try to find as many 2 stars, possibly 3 stars as we can find. Now in this case, I'm not using the Teemo for money, because all of our critical units, which are Viego, Jax, and Lucian, are silver, and no one is in danger of going up to gold or 3 stars. We're too far away. So even though buying a single Teemo wouldn't hurt us, the additional 5 gold won't help us, so there's no reason to do it. With our skirmisher buff at 9, we're gaining 15 damage per second, with Jax being able to sit in the backline the way he is, with the Radiant Rapid Fire Cannon hitting multiple targets with the Runin's Hurricane, and gaining health back with each attack, and shielding himself with that Bloodthirster. He can just dominate, and you can see that working even as Vel'Koz hits him with everything possible. It just doesn't matter. Jax is going to break through and win, and that is the skirmisher match. It was a pretty simple match because it gave us the characters and the items right off from the beginning. The redeem match was a lot more tricky. It didn't give us the characters as easily, but we ultimately got the items and then were able to fight through. Coming down to the end of this one, we're in a much different position. We are 1 hit away from dying and just hoping we can get all of our characters where we need. Here, with only a 1-star Kayle, it came very, very close, but Vel'Koz was able to hold on and win so that we could get into the final round with 1 more player left. Luckily, we had sold all of those Teemos earlier, so we have a lot of gold to roll through. That's the second Kayle, and then there's the third. We can sell the Vel'Koz that we had sitting on the side, hoping to get over to gold, and we now have the silver 2-star Kayle. We're also rocking 3 Mystics for maximum magic protection, and we still have enough money to look, and we're able to 2-star the Gwen. Again, the simple formula: a 2-star Gwen is 15, a 2-star Lulu is 9. That's an easy swap. 15 is bigger than 9, so you want to make that change. That Mystic buff is helping against those gold misfortune ults, and Kayle and Vel'Koz are working together to take them down as much as possible. Vel'Koz getting the final word and leading to victory. I hope all of this helped. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll be absolutely happy to answer anything I can, and hope I can help you on your way to Hyper. Hope you enjoyed this video. Have an absolutely awesome day.